Hello, my name is Autumn Sherrington Boyd, and this is my vlog for my reflective portfolio on an implemented learning experience activity for a child in my class. So let me first outline my setting. So my setting is an international private school in Dubai. We are an ecological school, which means that sustainability for the environment and nature-led child learning experiences are very much at the heart of our ethos. There are children from FS1, which are that pre-reception age of 3 to 4, which is the class that I teach. And we have 600 children in total, all the way up to year 8. So it's important, first of all, to note that the children in my class are very much impacted by current COVID regulations and safety guidelines. So in Dubai, we are governed by 2 local authorities. That is the KHDA, which is the Knowledge and Health Department Association, and also the DHA, which is the Dubai Health Authority as well. So it's important to note this because research already by Spitzer and Four show that the impact of wearing a mask in the classroom as a teacher has an impact on our well-being, and also the environment of stress as well. The added stress of the pandemic at home will also have a knock-on effect on children, and the children in my class are having to adhere to strict guidelines such as not being allowed to play with sensory items such as sand and water in the classroom. And this is particularly poignant for the child for the planned activity, as I will go into more detail, but this child was seeking these sensory experiences, and because of the COVID guidelines for the pandemic, this was unfortunately not able to happen. So first of all, just outline the child. So the child has been assessed by our inclusion team due to some early sort of indicators that I saw in the classroom of ADHD and also sensory seeking disorder. So basically, after seeing those sorts of behaviours in September, I went to the inclusion team in November, and they put him on a pre-wave register. So basically, it's really important for children, especially early as children, to get that early intervention, as the Harvard Center of Developing the Child, states that there's special neural circuits in our brains that are particularly flexible, or plastic as they call it, during the first 3 years. So while our brains are malleable and able to be dynamic and flexible, it's really good to give a child that input then when they are able to make those changes. So basically the activity arose because I was watching the child's behaviour, and there was a significant change in their behaviour. They were being very aggressive in the classroom. They were sort of they weren't focused. They were going around and around the classroom, emptying things, sort of being very, very physical with their friends in the classroom. And I use the Leuven scale a lot in my practice, and I used it as well in my dissertation to sort of indicate where a child was at in their well-being and involvement. And I saw that their levels were very, very low, and this wasn't typical to this child. So basically, after knowing this, we know also from the HighScope study and the Rouse study that actually it's really important that as teachers and practitioners we have that strong partnership with parents, because a lot of a child's development is impacted by their home experiences at home, how much they're read to, what their family dynamics are. So it's really important for me to have that strong relationships with my parents. So I went to the child's parents. I said I was noticing this, and could we perhaps have a meeting to sort of, I really would love to find out more and how I can support you, as your teacher. And what I discovered, and also by using the Hemingway and Freud iceberg reflective model, that actually the child's behaviour was showing on a very conscious level. So at the tip of the iceberg, the child was showing aggression, he was showing a lot of challenging behaviour, but actually when I talked to the parents, I could see that there was a lot of subconscious behaviour going on from the events at home, from a lot of feelings, from a change, and basically their nanny that they'd had from birth had now gone, and that had caused a real change and upset in the family. The parents were more stressed, they were having to work harder, and also the sibling was going through a lot of development milestones, and this meant this child felt very much like a little bit neglected. So basically, it really, looking into that model really made me reflect on my practice and also my team's practice, and how actually perhaps we were being a little bit too reactive to the child's behaviour instead of understanding the why and the bottom of the iceberg, and also understanding using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that basically you have these underlying basic needs, which are: is the child fed? Is the child safe? Are they happy? Have they had a good night's sleep? And in this case, the child hadn't. And we need to reflect as practitioners on our practice using this model to really approach children in the most effective way. Are their basic needs met? And if they're not, what can we do to make sure that they are, so that they're really flourishing? So from all of this information, I decided to make a plan for the child on how I could best support them. So using Sean's reflection on action versus inaction, I used a combination of both, because we know from so much research and theorists such as Vygotsky, Bruner, Piaget, that play is absolutely vital, and independence in play is vital, as Montessori advocates for. So I really wanted to go about this in a child-initiated way, but I also know that from my setting I do have pressures to record what I am planning and implementing, and also as a setting we haven't moved completely towards that child-initiated planning, so I had to use a mixture of both reflective practices. So like Burdett, Whitaker, Harrington and Bressoni say, play should be unstructured, it shouldn't be led by adults. But I also realised that I needed to make sure that it also was planned, and I used the Forest School approach to make sure that there were objectives and a holistic approach to this activity. So basically, after observing the child, I could see that they were sensory seeking. So they wanted to feel enclosed. They had that enclosing schema. They wanted to have a blanket around them. They wanted to be underneath something. They wanted to hug and squeeze other children often. So basically, I decided to do some shelter building, creating dens and feeling enclosed with that child, with a few other children, to work on his PACD, to go through his worries, but have a safe place where he could feel safe and really be able to experience those sensory desires that he seeks in order for him to feel regulated, happy and calm and learn in the classroom. So also I used an ABC model, which basically you reflect on the behaviour of the child to see what the antecedent is. Are there any triggers? And often I found that it was before snack time. So we needed to make sure that the child was well fed. What was the behaviour itself? So we had pushing, we had over squeezing of other children, and then what was the consequence? It would usually be a little bit of thinking time. So I had to reflect on that and think, okay, how can I go about making sure that those triggers weren't there, making sure he was well fed, and the consequences were age appropriate. So by using the EYFS, we could see that he was between 30 to 50, so that was his sort of age bracket. He was actually 50 months, but actually he was 30 to 50 developing. So if I was using the consequence as this time to talk, perhaps that approach was it wasn't age appropriate. So instead what we did is we used the consequence of the behavior was going out, being able to build a shelter, being able to self-regulate, and perhaps having a chat that way by calming down. So basically, by looking at the overall activity, I made sure that I followed the spark. So yes, it was reflected when I was reflective in action. I brought the different materials. So I brought the rugs, I brought chairs, tables, sticks, rope, blankets, and just said, lead the way. How can we build a shelter? How can we get cozy? And follow the child's lead. And often the plan, didn't go to plan. So we would end up that we were going on a monster hunt and we were hiding from the monsters, and that was okay because we know that children learn so much when it is child initiated. And research shows by Gonski that actually teacher-led activities are not beneficial in the long term on early years children. So I really wanted to make sure that I was reflecting in action. How can I give this child what he needs and able to feel safe, enclosed, and in meeting the needs of his schema? So lastly, to reflect on the whole process by using the child's lens from Brookfield's critical lenses, you could see that the child was more calm, especially when they came back to the classroom after the activity. You could see that they just felt calm. They'd been able to get that release. And when I asked the child, did you enjoy it? Would you like to do it again? They said yes, yes, yes. And every day they were asking, can we go and build a special den? So I could see from the child's lens that his needs were met. And this also really impacted in a positive way on my relationship with the parents as well. And also by looking at it through an autobiographical lens, I could see that I really needed to prioritize this iceberg theory that children are presenting in a certain way, and I need to find out the why behind that when I'm planning activities, when I am approaching behavior, because it's so important to find out the why in the home, because that impacts the children's outcomes so much. So that is my reflection on my activity. I hope you enjoyed.